This game that I'm looking at today is called Second Kharkov Strike Counter Strike May 1942. And I believe this is in Strategy and Tactics 271, which I don't have a copy of. I only have the game for this one. And this is a game designed by Paul Yuda. And I have another game by him, I think, called Sedan. It's also a Decision Games product. I think it may be World at War magazine. Sedan 1940 or something like that. I can't remember now. And this was developed by Ty Bomba, and I see a lot of Ty Bomba's fingerprints on this game. It's actually approachable. This is a 10-page rule book. This covers the same material as this S&T number 68, which I've also played, Kharkov, the Soviet Spring Offensive, 12 May to 21 May. Very similar scales here, I think. I believe that this game is 10 turns. This game is 8 turns. Each turn is 2 days. Each turn is a day. This one, each turn is 2 days. And the units are brigades and divisions. So they're very similar in what they're covering. And I think there's one other game that I know about on this. It's fairly new from Compass Games, I believe. And I think it's called Spring Prelude. There has been some video coverage on that game by some folks. It looks like that might be really the most thorough coverage of this topic. So anyway, I've written about this game in years past, I don't know, 2011 or 2012. So I'm just going to comment a little bit about what's covered here. In this Strategy and Tactics 271, the scale's 5 miles per hex. So if you're familiar with OCS, that's a very similar scale to that, which explains why we have divisions and brigades in this game. A few things to there are a few special rules that are involved in this game. One of them has to do with the turn sequence. So the Soviet is the first player. They're on the offensive. But the very first thing that happens at the opening of the game, normally not on the first 2 game turns though, is that the Germans have air interdiction, and they can kind of place the air unit in an area, and it will slow down or prevent the Soviet units from being able to move. So air power can be used that way, but not on the first 2 turns. Then the Soviets can move and then fight. The movement does have zones of control. So when you run into one, you have to stop. And then you can move out of one as long as you don't enter another one immediately on the next turn. Then the Soviets combat, and then the Germans take their interdiction aircraft back. Then for the German player turn, it's a little bit different. It's asymmetrical. The Germans can decide, do they want to move, then combat, or do they want to combat and then move? So it highlights their flexibility a little bit more. A couple of special rules. On game turn 1, all of the Soviet attacks get a +1 die roll modifier. I imagine this is symbolizing the surprise. Also, as I said, the interdiction skipped on the first turn. Also, the Germans, if they choose fight move, they get a -1 die roll modifier in addition to other die roll modifiers in their combat. So those are just a couple of things. There is attack restrictions on the first 2 turns. The 1st Panzer and the 17th Army cannot attack during the first 2 game turns. I'm not 100% sure what that simulates. The Germans can stack 3 units per hex. I believe the Soviets can stack 4. I've already commented on zones of control. So we'll go to victory. The Soviets are trying to capture Kharkov. And actually, they get a sudden death victory if they capture even one of the 3 Kharkov hexes in this game. So However, the Germans can also win a sudden death victory on game turn 4 if no Soviet forces have encroached into the Kharkov perimeter. So there's a perimeter marked on the map, and so these are things that both sides are going to be protective of initially. And then I believe at the end of the game, on game turn 8, there is a Soviet terminal supply check. And that basically is any of the Soviet units that are out of supply at the end of game turn 8, which is when the game ends. These are all 1 victory point each for the Germans. So that's basically how victory is delineated. One of the design notes in here is that Kharkov was to be a major communications and logistics node for the Germans' upcoming summer offensive to Stalingrad and the Caucasus oil fields. In capturing any part of that city, even just temporarily, the Soviet player has significantly disrupted the historic course of the war, and he is thereby awarded the victory on the basis of that. So that's just one of the justifications for that rule. Most everything else is fairly clear in this game. I mean, it's a simple enough game. You'll see when I go through the playthrough. There are a few rules around the terrain, but there's not a whole lot. I mean, the terrain effects chart is right on the map. Clear, forest, marsh, town, city, river hex sides, and such as that. And then there is the combat results table is on the chart, is on the map as well. So we'll take a look at how this game plays through, what the result was when I played it. Thanks for watching. So this map picture shows the opening setup that I have here at the outset of game turn 1, which is basically May 12th and 13th of 1942. And one of the things that you see in the map on the upper left is the city of Kharkov, and you can see there it does take up 3 hexes in its position. You also see there has a couple of panzer divisions hiding out in that area. You're also seeing the gray dotted line. That happens to be the Kharkov perimeter line. The Soviets have got to get in there by turn 4, or the Germans will win a sudden death victory. Also, the red dotted line is basically the Soviet start line. So that's kind of what you see in that picture. The German units that you're looking at there have a circled number 4, which means they're a 4-step unit. And you'll see that the Soviet units their attack and defense factors are question marks. These are basically hidden. Nobody knows the strength of these units until they enter combat. So that's an old mechanism that has been preserved in this game. Now this next picture is showing the end of turn 1, and you'll notice that some of the Soviet forces have actually crossed the front setup lines. You've got some infantry divisions that are moving across the line, and on the northern flank you've got some tank brigades that have crossed. So the Germans have a thin position, but all these units have they have zones of control. So even though there are gaps, the Soviets can't really move through those without eliminating a 3 or 4 step unit. You will notice the 294th is down to its 3rd step, though it took some losses. And also those panzers have moved forward. One of them, the 23rd Panzer, has moved out of the perimeter zone line so that it can set up this wall of defense to protect Kharkov. The Soviets tried to be as aggressive as they could on this turn because they have on this turn a die roll modifier in their favor, symbolizing the surprise of this offensive. Then we go to turn 2, which is May 14th and 15th, and there's still a restriction on German air interdiction, so the Soviet player is going to be able to proceed with the movement phase and continue that counterattack, trying to get into Kharkov is really what the goal is. So the forces south of the Donets River did manage to puncture and the German line and threaten to outflank the troops to the north. This picture shows the area to the south of Kharkov, and you've got the 37th tank and the 114th tank in the center there that are moving through with plenty of infantry support. So you've got a very thin line of German forces there. You've got the 62nd Division, which is really doing the lion's share of the work. And you've got the 44th Division that's blocking that bridge off the Donets River. You'll also see that weak 6th Romanian Corps that is deployed in the woods there, trying to take as much advantage of the terrain benefit, but they really only have 4 defense strength. And this next picture is again showing what it looks like around the area of Kharkov. There's not a lot of defense in Kharkov itself, but the Germans have somewhat gotten a defensive position, but you can see it's quite tenuous. You've got the Soviet 41 Infantry Division and the 12th Tank Brigade there that have a very nearly poking through and getting into that Kharkov perimeter area. And obviously you have the 297th German Infantry Division that's blocking that bridge, but it's now surrounded and out of supply in that location. But it really needs to hold that bridge to keep units from the south from easy crossing of the Donets River. Now we go on to turn 3. It's May 16th and 17th, and the German player now has some interdiction. So he places these 3 interdiction chits, which are aircraft counters, to try to slow the Soviet advance toward Kharkov. So the interdiction, these are the air units can be used for ground support, but if they're put on their interdiction side, they can be placed in a hex, and that hex now is subject to interdiction, as well as the 6 surrounding hexes that would be in, like we could call, the zone of control. And this causes the Soviet forces to have to expend an additional movement point for any of these basically 7 hexes that they go into from this interdiction marker. So these are very powerful, even though it's tempting to use the air support for close ground support. The interdiction is very powerful. You'll notice in this photo, I believe it's photo number 5, showing the Soviet army progress at the end of the turn, and you'll notice that the 5th Guard Brigade, along with supporting troops, have crossed into that Kharkov perimeter. So this is, I believe, turn 3. So this eliminates now the German sudden death, which would be to prevent any of the Soviet forces to get into that perimeter. Despite that, there is a fairly strong defense. You know, to the north of Kharkov, you have the 305th Division. It's a very powerful 4-step, 12 defensive strength unit. And you'll notice the 294th has done its job. It's reduced down to 1 step now, but there's another unit underneath it. You also have the 23rd Panzer, not as good of a defensive unit, but if it has an opportunity to do a counterattack, you can imagine I'll be using it for that. And then you've got just south of that unit, you have the 71st Infantry Division. And the Soviets have a fairly concentrated attack here coming from the east, but the Germans have a decent defensive perimeter set up to defend Kharkov.